Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty on the feed. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty.
Good morning, Bellows Falls and Keene, and welcome to The Feed. This is our first show of 2025. We're here with Gary Fox. We're going to be talking about some issues that are very important to the town meeting that is coming up in just a little while. It's only about 6 weeks away. So it's going to come up really fast. We wanted to have Gary on. He's done a couple sort of foundation laying shows, and now he's going to move on and get to the big issues. But first, Marty, with local events.
Local events. So at the Bells Falls Opera House this week, I'm not sure. It's not posted yet. They just wrapped up Wicked, which I think was a big hit. Every time I would drive through the square at night, it was pretty much packed. But the classic movie tonight, and it's sponsored by Rick Gavotsky, is Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman.
Amazing show. I
Really?
mean, when it first came out, it was really...
I watched the trailer and I'm
Yeah.
like, it seems weird.
It's bizarre. I'm not going to
Okay.
I'm not going to deny it.
It came from
but-
that era of weird movies like
this
that.
was this weird
Like Dr.
Westerns,
Strangelove okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyway, Little Big Man at the Opera House. Thursday night at the Moose from 5 to 7:30 is Singo, which is actually really fun. I didn't know what the concept was. I knew it was singing bingo, but I didn't understand it. So basically you get a bingo card that has songs on it, and then the person that's running it will play songs, and when you recognize the name of that song, you check it on your bingo card, and then when you get your line across or coverall or whatever, you get bingo. So it's kind of fun because the one that we went to, they started out with 80s songs. So, well, there you go. I didn't want to leave. So that's from 5 to 7:30 at the Moose. It's a chamber event. I don't think you have to sign up. I think you can just show up. This Sunday, and it's going to be a reoccurring event, and I jumped, and I'm sorry to the guys. I'm going to talk about the tea dance. Thank you. Sorry, I jumped ahead in how I had it listed. This Sunday at Chow Popolo in the ballroom, they're doing an event called a tea dance, and what it is from 4 to 7 p.m. They'll be playing music. You can just come in, you can dance, you can buy refreshments from Popolo. It is a 21 and up audience, and they're going to be doing it. I believe it's the second. I guess this would be the second Sunday. Is this the second Sunday of the year? Anyway, it's on a reoccurring level. They're going to try it, and then. Next weekend, the weekend of the 17th and the 18th at Main Street Arts is a performance called Murder by the Book. It is a benefit for Rockingham Library and Main Street Arts, and it's being produced and directed by Sam Howard, the amazing children's librarian at the Rockingham Library. So I think it will be a very fun and very engaging theatrical performance. Mm-hmm. So that's it for local events.
Okay. So do you want to sort of recap
I was going to
what we've talked about?
the past 2 weeks to make sure that I understand kind of the gist of what we're talking about. Because if I understand it, then probably people in the audience will understand it. So the first week that you came on, you talked a lot about the challenges of doing any kind of project around here, and Brownsfields, the challenges of the environmental stuff. And I can speak to that. Having no background in doing a project and trying to do a big project here at Graz, there's a lot that can come up, and there's stuff that can come up that you don't expect. We are in that same place right now. Something came up, it's like, oh, didn't know that was going to happen. So it's a challenge, and it's just a challenge that's inherent in doing that kind of project. And you have to be prepared to pivot and to shift and to, you're still going to get to the end game, but it might not happen in the time frame that you think it might. It might not happen directly the way you think it might, but it's part and parcel of doing a project. So that's number one. The Brownsfields are going to be a problem. Environmental is going to be an issue. You have to deal with it. No way around it. And then the thing that was intriguing to me that I didn't understand, but now I get, is that why there's a big focus on developing any downtown area, because the money that you put into development in a downtown area or downtown district brings you back like exponentially more in tax money than developing in an area away from a downtown district. You know, preserving buildings that you have, redeveloping buildings that you have in that, is it called like a designated downtown or concentrated downtown? It's well worth the money spent in, because you get your return on investment in a much better way in tax revenue. And the more tax revenue that you get from that type of tax revenue, then ultimately the better it is for the residents as far as their taxes. Did I nail it?
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Central Business District.
Okay. Central Business District. Okay. Okay. So then the next thing is looking at the big picture of what we're going to talk more about today is kind of the plan. How do you go about this? So you have an area-wide plan. Okay.
Yes. So, great recap.
I just have to get my little brain wrapped around it to make sure
Sure.
that I can
Yeah.
understand it
And
too.
so for Rockingham, the Central Business District is a Vermont designated downtown, and that Vermont's program brings benefits with it that are helpful economically. But certainly the impact of developing in the downtown nationwide, just a principle that it's math. And so for Rockingham, Bellows Falls Business District includes the Island District and the Square. Is the central business district. And the Island District, way underdeveloped. A couple of organizations, individuals have done a good job of rehabbing their particular areas, but most of the island underutilized or abandoned and under the hill. And so we had that area-wide plan that we talked about last week to redevelop in that central business district. And so we have a plan, and it starts at the Depot Street Bridge and the train station. It's kind of the gateway to this redevelopment area. So another economic development principle is that private investment follows public investment. So people are. So we remediated the Robertson paper site, and so now we have a great industrial site, but you're looking to attract a private developer to invest millions of dollars in it, and yet you have it's on an island. One bridge is closed. Depot Street Bridge is fallen into. You come across the railroad tracks, and you have another crumbling building. So really. When you can make that public investment that starts to lift up the area, and people that are looking to invest, looking to do development, see that, brand new $15 million bridge that's restructured from the 1905 version that has
Sharp
two tighter
turns,
corners for today's size vehicles, and where you have crumbling into the canal. You have a whole new configuration that's modern, heavy duty, makes for smooth flow of traffic. And then same with preserving the train station. So there's a couple of things about that. One is just the historic preservation aspects. In terms of a sentimental perspective, in the community, we've gotten very upset about losing the Robertson Paper Building, losing the YMCA building. And so this was an opportunity we identified where we could save a building. It'll maintain us having a great waiting area on a growing intercity Amtrak service schedule and intercity bus. So it helps us economically, and it'll help beautify that gateway to our area-wide plan.
Preserves the history, the rich history of railroad was huge. My dad's family were railroad men, so there's that connection. And I think when kind of taking that tie to the reason that sometimes tourists come, they're intrigued by that type. Like when you travel, don't you want to know the history of the place and see places that were historic to that area? That's why you're traveling there. So that seems another, like, yes, it's sentimental to the town, but it's also kind of a draw for people that are, want to know the history. They come to an area because they want to know the history, not just for the shopping or not just for the, that type stuff, but to get to for the history.
Sure, there's a couple of certainly distinguishing historical factors that shaped Bellows Falls, and the canal is one of them.
Of course.
And then the railroad industry is the other. And so the canal in the 1790s, locks, transportation, log drives, and then when the railroad came through, locks got taken up. No longer need to use that for transportation. And William Russell, a paper mill owner, who built a mill on the island, purchased the canal from the Bellows Falls Canal Company in London and started to make took the locks up and made tributaries to power paper mills. And so anyway, the railroad, still a beautiful railroad. There's 3 short lines that use Bellows Falls Rail as a hub: the Pan Am Guilford, Green Mountain Railroad, and CSX, part of Vermont Rail System, and then the Genesee, Wyoming's New England Central Railroad. They all have 3 different freight yards where they switch off cars, and they all use that central junction right in front of the passenger station. And so, rich history. And so as we were discussing before the show, any project that you do is commercial, industrial projects, you're going to run into challenges. And I remember when we were building the Connecticut River Transit, now Southeastern Vermont Mover, facility up by Exit 6. The board president there was a developer, and he said, so the main thing to remember is that as you get into these projects is that you're always going to have things go wrong every day, but certainly when you get to construction, so we're not even at that phase yet. Expect 100 things to go wrong per day.
Don't tell me that, Gary. Don't tell me that. We're not
at
construction yet, but good to know. Okay, it's true. It's true.
So with the train station project, we started, I think, 2022 maybe. We went to 2021. We went and asked for funds for a feasibility study at town meeting. 2022. We asked for a vote on purchasing the station and $75,000 towards the purchase. And a plan was presented at that time that the knowledge that we had of the existing conditions in 2022.
There's your key.
Here's our
the
plan.
knowledge you had at that time.
Right. Here's the plan. So things have shifted a lot, a few different circumstances. So we knew that the state of Vermont Rail Division owned the land, and that the Vermont Rail System only owned the building. That's what we were buying, and we'd have to lease the land. What we didn't know was that when we performed our environmental site investigation in the building, that the basement, the ground, the dirt under the concrete was considered part of the Vermont land. So when we followed the instructions that the phase 1 indicated, you might have this issue, you need to investigate in the basement and to see if there's vapor, because there's vapor intrusion in the waypoint. And so upon that investigation, it turned out that wasn't part of the building. We weren't supposed to be identifying under the concrete. And so it created a bit of a mess with opening the rail yard, the land outside the building, to environmental site investigation. So it adds some potential unknown, uncertain. So it's the unknowns and the uncertainty that are the scariest parts for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the kind of the misconception, and I certainly had this misconception, is when you go into a project like this, like, it's kind of like you just follow a path, right? Like, this is what you do, and then you go to step E, and then there's a certain amount of that, but there's not like there's this master guideline for how to do this. You have to kind of, because everything comes up as it comes up, and you have to just, like I said, you have to deal with it.
You would think the regulations would lay that out.
You would think, right? You would think that
they just say this is what needs to be done if this is here. Yeah, but if you don't know that this is here, you don't know that this needs to be done.
Yeah, that's the thing that's really frustrating. And so Vermont, I agree with the Vermont and their environmental standards, but then sometimes they're kind of, I don't know what word I want to use. I don't want to be offensive, but they're somewhat ambiguous, sort of, so that it doesn't warn you, oh, wait a minute, this is probably going to lead to this, until all of a sudden you're like, ooh, it led to this. So
Yes.
anyway.
So let me just say the two things I want to make sure to cover are, one, the surprises and challenges, and two, why they're not as scary as they might seem. And so, so the biggest things, opening up the rail yard to site investigation is an unknown, and certainly involves a lot of environmental work, potential challenges, and potential costs. And then the second piece is just that a lease with the state has conditions in it that can be scary for what we want to do with the building. And so then those are two things that I'll address how we work with those. But I first want to say there's also the issue of what we said in 2022. It became clear to me last night in the select board meeting with some comments from the public and the select board that one of the issues is that we laid out this vision in 2022, and due to conditions we discover along the way, there's dependencies. And when there's a particular condition, it means you used a good pivot. You have to pivot. And so one of the things in the vision, just a quick example, was that we had designs in the feasibility study for a nano brewery in the a baggage room that the old rail carts rolled through to get weighed, and then a restaurant and that's on the south end, and then a restaurant in the north end, and that would produce some revenues that could go to the town as payment in lieu of taxes. Again, help with that grand list, pay for operations of the building. We don't want anything to add to the tax burden, right? We want operations to cover themselves. And then it turns out, as we're going through the National Environmental Policy Act, that with all of the rains and flooding we're having these days, so in the past we're not in the 100-year floodplain, no big deal. Oh, now with the
Wait a minute,
what we've
we
been
are.
facing with floods, we're in the so we're not in the 100-year floodplain, which had been the threshold. We're in the 500-year floodplain, which now means, okay, nothing in the basement. We need to use the basement for flood proofing and stormwater systems, and so that uses some of the space. So no nano brewery, and that's where the kitchen will go for the restaurant. And so that's a big shift. And someone in the public was saying, so if there's not going to brewery, you told us there was going to be a brewery. How was the so that's part of the pivots. And so really the issue is that it's close to 3 years ago now with the information that we had, a lot of discovery. And so what we haven't done, so everything has come up in different instances. We've gone to the select board with updates. We've talked about different pieces, but not a reset of here's the big picture. Here's what's different than what you voted on in 2022.
Because there's external factors that are happening. When we get a 100-year flood every year, the state changes the flood regulations.
500-year flood counts
and now 500-year flood counts.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have foreseen that.
No.
Right. So what we haven't done is what we will do. The select board asked last night for this, and it's a great idea, is that we're going to have a section in the town report on grants. Just, hey, here's the percentage of funds. Here's all the grants that highway, economic development, that everyone, fire grants, just that everyone in the town works for and funds that saves taxpayer money, whether it's water and sewer, whether it's highway, whether it's economic aspects. And so in that section, we're also going to have, here's the train station update. Here's everything that changed. Here's the challenges and why you might be scared to do this liability-wise. And here's why we feel it's still a good project. So there's things like, okay, so no nano brewery, just a restaurant. Well, the architectural team that we hired during the NEPA process also does a lot of restaurants in the areas, and so they've provided pro formas. Here's here's what you're going to look at year 1, year 2, year 3, and it and so the numbers work, and we're comfortable with that. And so that's an example. There's also the other challenges, whether lease conditions. So an example is in a restaurant, we want to, a lot of the margin comes from being able to have nice dinners with alcohol, like you have a nice mixed drink. And so the lease says no alcohol on state land. And so the issue is, we talked it through with VTrans, and these leases, they're stock leases for rail property. You're around railroads, it's dangerous, and they want to be able to say that if you're serving alcohol, they know that you have a liquor license for whatever you're doing. You have policies and procedures in place for
Like you
safety
can't
with the
leave the
railroad.
building with a liquor, like
Yes.
Yeah.
our what is it called, open bottle law that we
Yes.
have already. That's already a town thing. You
Exactly.
can't walk onto the sidewalk with a beer if you're in a restaurant.
yes.
Yeah.
Like you can't walk out of Popolo with and to go outside and talk on the phone with the beer in your hand on the sidewalk. So we have that in place. So-
And traditionally, passenger stations on railroad cars has been an area where you've been able to not necessarily follow state liquor laws. There's some you could have. Oh yeah, you could have like wine and cheese parties, and you could. And so their way of having control over that and making sure you're in sync with is by having a line that no alcohol unless in writing with the state. So so there's aspects like that. At one point, we wanted to have seating outside on the platform. There's on the north section. There's looking up the river, and there's like these big windows to serve right outside, and so there's two tracks that cross right there, and you have Amtrak going through, freight trains, and so they were if it's not safe to do that on the platform. If you're going to do that, we're going. So, and this wasn't the state, but this was. The state has to have it in the lease because the operating railroads, New England Central Railroad, said if you're going to have tables and alcohol served in the platform, you're going to have a 10-foot anti-climb fence. Right? No one wants like these prison, right? So no seating and alcohol on the platform. There's you don't need any fencing, but it's in the lease that they can require a fence. And so, the discussion with them, no, they're not going to do that. But if we're going to have seating and alcohol, then yes, New England Central's going to require a
you have to
fence.
follow,
So those are the realities of some of the scary language, but it's nuanced.
So I don't know. As you were saying this, I was thinking about the boiler project that we have going on here, and we've run into different things. And I was talking to like a consultant, and he said, well, because it was we weren't sure if we could get the full funding for the wood project. At the end of the day, we need a boiler. He said that at the end of the day, that's your end game. You need to have a boiler. But so you might have to pivot your scope. It might not be a wood boiler. It might be another boiler, or it might be something else, or it might be something else. But at the end of the day, you have to provide heat. So that's kind of like, and that like struck me as that kind of is what you have to think about. So you kind of have this plan, but your end game is this. The end game is to preserve that entity and make it work somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
But maybe what you said back here isn't going to be what happens there, but you did the core scope of preserving the building and making it an anchor point for more development in that area. And we are down to less than 2 minutes.
You're achieving the
But you
objective
get-
of
Yeah.
heating the
You
building.
get
Yes.
it's like
And
the
that's
goal is not the train station. The goal is the island.
right.
And the train station is the first step to the island.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's where the money
Yes.
is, on the island.
Yeah, and the objective is having it support itself, having it be
Yeah,
a destination
you want it to be
with
good,
a
but it's
restaurant.
not-
It's not having seats and alcohol on the platform. So so you have to pivot.
Yeah.
And so we certainly on staff we feel good about the project. We're working with Stone Environmental and have negotiated. Oh yeah, that's the other piece. So the environmental stuff, there's rules and they're ambiguous, but the regulators always have a say in how to do things. So when the vapor was first discovered, there's this really scary letter that comes out that goes to the state, you're responsible for this, we want this in 30 days, this in 90 days. But then, so it's our project, we need to make the environmental stuff work, and so we're working with Wyndham Regional Commission and Stone Environmental, and they go to the state regulators and say, hey, here's what we can do. We could do it in 2 phases. This allows the town to purchase the building, it remediates the vapor, we just keep a partial action plan and allow that for NEPA. The NEPA folks say, yeah, sure, that works. And then, so we get to that part and you do the next one in a phase. So the regulators, if you're reasonable and can work with them, there's that ambiguosity is not necessarily a negative. It allows room to collaborate and work together so that you still achieve that objective, even if it looks a little different than the original picture. The objective is the same.
We are almost out of time. And again, we're right at the point where we're deep into the
Yeah, I
discussion.
know,
So
really.
we should probably try to have one more, like
Yeah.
have you come back one more time.
Sure, February,
Because the
yeah.
vote is in
That'd be
March.
great.
So come back in February. So stay tuned for
Yeah.
more. Hopefully we answer some questions for people today.
And that's it. We'll
Bye,
see you next
community.
week on the feed.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and